to be very critical with the available data, because a lot of available data are not actually the product of, are not actually the raw science. In fact, one comment that I want to make, and that's very clearly known, is that the IPCC figures are taken as the science, but these are the science tempered by the political acceptance. That also is very well known. But here in this presentation, I'll try to stick to those figures, not try to go behind the figures, how this has been changed or these are changing. Next slide, please. This is very well known, the context, why we need to do this, what has happened. Next. Here also you can see these are figures are known, but you can see two lines. One is the 2 degrees Celsius goal as an outcome that Raghuranjanji has talked about, and it's talked about in all. And the dashed line is 1.5 degree, which many of the island nations, LDCs, many others are were insisting on, and even now insisting on. And the whole band is where actually we are going as a result of today's emissions. Next, please. This is the current emission trend. It's not all countries, but the major countries are there. And the current emission trends, you can see very clearly. The multicolored band of different countries. These are leading to, this is the emission, the total gross emission, global emission trends. And the line that is coming down is what is actually needed if we want to have that outcome of remaining within the 2 degrees Celsius. So you can very clearly see, which was in fact even clear in the IPCC 4, Assessment Report 4, that ideal situation for achieving this, if we don't want to put pressure on all countries to do much more later, is to peak the global emission by 2015. Of course, there are recent instances of going beyond this, but the 2015 peaking and then coming down was an ideal outcome if you wanted to keep within this 2 degrees Celsius. Next, please. This is both the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere on the left-hand side axis, the vertical axis, and also how much actually, at what Raghuranjanji was talking about, how much actually that global total cumulative emissions are becoming. I'll not go into details of this, but it's very clear that by 2030, whatever, because 2030 today is becoming important suddenly, because China and US has got together and trying to shift the goalpost from earlier agreed dates. This is the kind of emissions we have crossed in different points of, like the more progressive demand for 350 ppm, we already crossed in 1998, and 400 we crossed just now, or around, we are around that time. Next, please. These are the real present emissions and the trends that we are going to, what will happen. These are modeling, of course, what will happen as a result of present different kind of emission trends. And many of these, the present in the left-hand side solid line on the left side is the historic emission data, and all the colored lines are projections, different kinds of projections. Here you can see very clearly there is only there's 2 degrees Celsius is the lowest line, that's the blue line, and rest all are, which if we do not do the maximum amount of reduction, that we will come to later. How much is the actual emission today, how much is going to be emitted cumulatively, and what is the reduction needed. All the other lines, which are projections, are leading up to 4 to 6 degrees Celsius for the topmost line. Next, please. This is what Raghuranjanji was again mentioning. All of us know very well that though there are pledges, from Cancun, there are pledges different countries have made. All the pledges are actually far below what is actually needed. And there is one other important point, why the US keeps insisting on the 2005 baseline instead of 1990. If you look at the data, US emissions actually peaked in 2005. So shifting the baseline, the benchmark year from 1990 to 2005 actually makes the reduction much less. This is not true for only EU and Russia. Russia for obvious reasons, because after the fall of the Soviet Union, all the coal industries, all the dirty steel industries closed down, so actually there was a reduction. But for all other countries in the world, 1990 was a far lower emission year. So taking 1990 baseline year would mean that you have to do a much larger reduction. And shifting the baseline a benchmark year to 2005, as the US has now effectively dictated, will make your actual reduction much less. Next, please. This is what is actually what we are trends, the historic emissions up to roughly around 2010, the trends which is business as usual trend, reference pathway business as usual, and what is actually needed to keep the atmospheric concentration within 450 ppm. Because as I said, within the politically negotiated understanding of 450 ppm being enough for keeping the temperature at 2 degree, within 2 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial time, that is the emission that you need to come down to. And there, I'd like to focus purposefully, not on, as the IPCC Air Force has said, from 2100, because as we know very clearly, as in the earlier slide we have seen, that for safe methods of keeping to within 2 degrees Celsius, 2015 was supposed to be the peaking year. That has shifted. We are not going to peak our emissions by any chance by 2015. 2020, there is hardly any chance with the recent announcements. So what is the emission gap from business as usual? The science says by 2020, your emissions, the global emissions, and this is carbon dioxide equivalent, not only the CO2, all GHGs together and with their global warming potential calculated, has to come down to 44. The business as usual as of 3 years ago was 61. So the gap from business as usual to what is needed is 17 gigaton. That's from business as well. Next slide, please. This is what is including the pledges, and there are two kinds of pledges that has been considered, as all of you probably know. One is unconditional free pledges that the governments have done. So those pledges, if you go by that, what again the previous speaker was mentioning very clearly, these are the figures. If you take all the pledges as of now, unconditional loose pledges, the low expectation pledges, then you have a gap in 2020. Why I'm saying 2020? Because that has been calculated very clearly that again, if you peak at 2020 and come down, then there's still some chance. And that's around 11 gigaton. There are, from various calculations, there is a very little difference between that, but let's not go into that, how much it is 11 or 12 or 14, but roughly around 11.5 gigatons of emission gap is there. And that's not from business as usual, that's from already pledged reduction amounts. If you take maximum pledges, conditional pledges with supports with finance and technology, even then the gap remains 6 gigaton or more. Next please. This is again from the UN emission gap report as adopted by as adopted by CAN in their presentation. I have taken that slide. Here also you can see there are two scenarios given. One is for the 2 degrees Celsius, one is for remaining within 1.5 degrees Celsius. Of course, these are scenarios, nobody really expects us to be anywhere near any one of these. That's the reality, unfortunate reality. But these are the gaps that you have. Even for the 2 degrees Celsius, not for 1.5 degrees Celsius, which even IPCC and everyone else now agrees, all the international announcements, they accept this 2 degrees Celsius. Even then, there is a 5 to 9 gigaton gap in carbon dioxide equivalent emission. Next slide, please. And this is what the trend is. Knowing all this is not unknown for the last 7, 8, 10 years. But knowing all this, you can see what has happened to different emission levels of different major emitting countries or blocks. Middle East is not a country, it's a block. The diamonds, the orange diamonds are actually the percentage of global emission that this country or the block actually emits. And the bars are actually what happened from 2011 to 2012. Of course, US might claim that we have reduced our emission by nearly 200 million tons. And that's basically because of, there is a hidden truth inside. It's true, their calculated emissions have come down because of shift to fracked gas. But the actual fugitive emission of gas, methane, and the global warming potential of that has not been calculated. I'm not going into that, as I said, the data as given I am taking, not going into analyzing this. But even there you can see very clearly that many of the countries, many of the major countries and major polluters have actually increased their emission Even last 2011 to 12, same thing goes for 12 to 13. Next, please. This I just won't go into details, but this is very clearly true for all poorer countries. They have repeatedly brought this out, that they have another gap, which is a total, which is human development. And as Raghunandanji has said, you go by HDI, you add more factors into the HDI, but that is one gap that you cannot really throw away just looking at carbon. Because India, in spite of the hype in the global circle of India's emergence, India's HDI is still in the low. It's not even medium HDI country, it's a low HDI country. So this is one more gap the southern countries cannot ignore. Next, please. And this is another factor that, in spite of the historical responsibility of the rich countries, either the Annex I countries or rich countries or OECD countries, they have actually pledged, even in the pledge and review system, and review is still not there, which probably will come, but even the pledges they have made, and the developing countries, the pledges they have made, if you add them up, and this is also known in the public domain data, the developing countries have pledged actually more reduction than the developed countries. So this is unfortunate. In spite of all the talks of all the sermon that the US and others give, and the so-called climate leadership that the global media is giving to US for the recent announcement, these are the truths. You can see the total abatement pledges that the developing countries have done, and the developed countries have done. Developing is the orange one, developed is the blue one, and you can see very clearly the orange or the reddish one is larger. Next, please. Next. This is what I was also talking about. The danger of shifting the peak emission year further is very clear. The further in time you go in peaking your emission, you have to act much faster in a far more stronger way to bring down the emission if we have to keep within that 2 degrees Celsius goal. That's why earlier this 2015 was thought of as a ideal or desirable goal. That's nowhere there now. So now if you go to 2020, and there is a danger of shifting these targets, whatever the inside story is, shifting the target from 2020 to 2050 to 2100, because then there is this action. There is, see, if you peak in 2020, then hence next year onward, 2021 onward, the global emissions have to come down by 9% per year. Nothing of that sort has achieved even now, in spite of the hype of renewable energy and all. So if you shift this peaking year even further down, then your target will be far more. Next slide, please. I'll not go into details of this. This is the emission gap. How do you close the emission gap? There are pledges, there are conditional pledges, which is a little far, but very clearly if you can look into the right hand side, even the conditional pledges with lot of support are not enough. We'll have to do much more than the pledges, and that's what I'm calling pledge plus plus. Next slide. These are clearly, if we have to do the emission reduction, that is the mitigation, and do it within the target given, that is to keep that within 2 degrees Celsius, then what are the sectors that have the most potential for addressing this problem? Here you can see which are the sectors which are emitting by percentage of global emission the maximum, and very clearly the energy, industry and transportation sectors are the major emitters, and they have the maximum potential through technology and finance. Lot of people have harped on agriculture. In fact, FAO and the recent climate summit of the UN, they have harped on agricultural mitigation. But clearly agriculture being so widespread, having a much smaller footprint of emission, it's very difficult, and it will have much more serious consequences. Next slide, please. This is again the same story from a different angle. Which are the sectors where emissions are growing the fastest? That means you have to address those problems first. And again you can see the energy sector, electricity and heat, transportation, industry actually even are growing faster than the other sectors. Actually agricultural sector emission has more or less stagnated. It has not increased. Next slide, please. And this is another area of how the gap can be closed. Instead of putting all the energy sector together, it is a little bit differentiated. And here again you can see the large potential is industry, power, transport. Agriculture, of course, is seen because, as I said, these are official data where agriculture is being pushed again and again. But from developing country, from poor country perspective, this will be a very risky area. Next slide. And this is very clear, obvious, which there is a huge resistance to, in spite of the economics of renewable energy changing, that still around close to 80% of global energy comes from fossil carbon. And unless you address that problem, unless you eliminate the subsidies, you switch over, you phase out, not switch over overnight, you phase out, there is clearly something which is 80% of your energy and emissions come from that, whether from agriculture or from industry or buildings, it comes from fossil fuels. So there is no other way. Next slide, please. This is again a very detailed data. I will not go into that, but you can see very clearly again on the right hand side that this is the wage of closing the gap, that a lighter blue is the pledge, the green is more than the pledges, and then there are different sectors that you have to really address individually. As I said, energy, transport and industry are major areas, but within that there are many areas which have larger potential, which can be addressed with technology and finance much faster. And why I'm saying much faster? Because of the earlier slide that we have seen, the faster we come into a peak emission, the easier it will be to handle mitigation in the later stages. Next please. This is the kind of potential that has been calculated from different sectors for closing the emission gap. You can see there are again the transport sector, the industries, these are power sector, these are major areas. These are the numbers, rough numbers. These are not actually fixed numbers. In fact, understanding is you can go much beyond this in the power sector, industry sector and transport sector. But these are basically very conservative figures which are feasible with today's technology and kind of finance that is available today. Next. And I will not go into detail in this because this will be talked in detail, but what this has done, the overhyped US and China announcement, climate deal announcement, whatever you call it, is effectively reduced ambition for many other emerging emitters, effectively bypassed or sidelined multilateral UN negotiations by saying most powerful countries have a right to declare and have a right to determine when the emission reduction will be done, how much it will be done, and others better follow. You are either with us or against us. So that kind of a power statement that since we have the might, we might be wrong, but whatever we do is right. So that kind of statement has been given. I think detail analysis will be done later. Next. This was just an overview, not a very detailed analysis, and as has been brought out again and again, actual work needs to be done at the political level because all the other details are very well known. There are questionable data, but those data were very conservative. Even at that conservative levels, if you can see that we can address the mitigation problem, then with a little more progressive interventions, with technology really helping the cause in the last 5 years, we can really switch over. But then that has to be done, decision has to be taken at the political level. Thank you.
Thanks, Soumya, especially